there's obviously a lot of people that drink alcohol. I'd be interested to know if you still drink alcohol at all. What are the risks of drinking alcohol? Is there a certain amount of drinks, if people do want to drink, that you would recommend a week? What is the kind of clean alcohol to be able to drink?
Yeah, alcohol is an interesting one. The challenge with studying this question, of course, is as with all things nutrition related, if you want to see and understand the effect of a nutrient, which alcohol is, over a long period of time, over many, many people, you have to rely on epidemiology, which of course cannot establish causality. I mean, it's the exception when epidemiology can establish causality. It seems pretty clear that smoking is causally related to cancer, even though that's an epidemiologic inference. Just as it seems pretty clear epidemiologically that exercise is causally related to improved mortality, although it's hard to demonstrate that experimentally. But when it comes to food, it's much more dirty because the magnitude of the effects is much smaller, and a lot of the confounding variables are more intertwined. But nevertheless, when you look at this question for alcohol, what you learn is that there appears to be this J curve. The J curve representing kind of the mortality curve as alcohol goes up. So as alcohol consumption increases, you have this initial reduction in mortality before you see a steep rise in mortality. And this so-called J curve has led some observers to believe that modest amounts of alcohol might be beneficial. And then, of course, you have the whole French paradox, which is, boy, these guys over there, they're eating all their fatty foods and drinking all their wine, and yet they seem to be healthier. So, again, the actual impact of that is relatively small, but there are other explanations for the J curve. I won't go into them all now, although we've written about them in detail. But the gist of it is that there's a negative selection bias on the abstainers. And that kind of factors into the epidemiology. So if you instead look at some of the more mechanistic data or short-term data, I actually think, and I'd couple this with one other thing, which is important, called Mendelian randomization. You actually come to the realization where I believe that no amount of alcohol is helpful. So no additional amount of alcohol does good, but the curve is non-linear. So at the very beginning, if you were to go from, say, 0 drinks a day to 1 drink a day, there's a slight increase in the risk of in the risk of death or mortality. But it's not as big as the risk of going from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. So this, in math, we would say this is a curve that not only has a positive first derivative, but a positive second derivative. So the good news there is, if you're listening to this and you have 3 drinks a day, you should take great comfort in knowing that if you can reduce it to 2 drinks a day, you're really doing something to improve your health. And if you're maybe feeling a little more ambitious, maybe take it down to 1 drink a day, and you're going to get, a further benefit. So I think that's the unfortunate reality of it, is that as much as it would be great if there was a J curve and we could prescribe everybody should have 1 to 2 drinks every day for optimal health, and that's the minimum risk state, I don't believe that that's the case. And I think that the data that suggest that are flawed and inferior to the data that suggest otherwise.
Do you drink at all? And I'd love to know what, a clean kind of drink is. If you're going out and you want to have a drink, but you don't want to have one that's like full of preservatives or sugar, what do you suggest?
I do drink. How much do I drink? I probably have 5 drinks a week. And again, it varies. There's some weeks I have none. I have a couple of rules around alcohol. I never really drink for the sake of it. So I'm a big discarder of alcohol, right? So if I open a bottle of wine, even if it's really expensive, if I don't like the taste, like the other day, actually, my wife grabbed a bottle out of the cooler. It was kind of a pricey Pinot. I opened it and I was like, I don't care for it. I was like, do you like it? And she's like, it's okay. And I was like, well, unless you're wed to it and you want to drink it, I'm going to dump it down the sink. It's not worth it. Like, I'm not going to consume
Yes.
alcohol that doesn't taste exceptional. So, but I did want to drink. So I went and I think I got a cab that I really like and had a glass of that. I don't know that I buy the idea that there's like healthy or clean alcohol. I know that it's very in vogue for people to talk about that. Um, the only alcohol I really like outside of certain wines is I really like tequila. I really like mezcal.
Mm.
I like to drink them absolutely neat. So I don't want any ice. I don't want any soda water. I don't want anything. I really actually like to drink it, sip it slowly in that fashion. But, can I really tell you that that's better or worse than vodka, bourbon, scotch, or whatever? It's hard for me to imagine.
Yeah. I'd like to talk now about something that I think a lot of women who listen to this podcast are going through, which is like perimenopause, menopause. And I've heard you say before on our friend Andrew Huberman's podcast that this is the biggest screw up of the entire medical field in the last 25 years. But I wonder what you suggest for people kind of navigating this time as far as diet, exercise, or drugs.
Well, perimenopause is a topic I continue to learn a lot about, and I'm really fortunate that one of the doctors in our practice, her name is Eve Henry, um, has taken an unbelievable keen interest in, and as such, she is now the primary conduit of knowledge into our practice. Because truthfully, in my early days of treating women, it was mostly treating women during menopause, right? So it was using hormone replacement therapy once a woman was fully in menopause. And truthfully, that's actually a pretty easy thing to do. What is now clear to me is that you really need to be treating women long before they enter menopause, and there needs to be a lot of attention towards the perimenopausal transition. So I'll give you just one example of this. We now know that, well, we've certainly known for some time that bone loss is a big problem for women in menopause because, of course, bone loss is exacerbated by the absence of estrogen. Estrogen is the most important hormone when it comes to regulating bone mass. And so, not surprisingly, as women begin to lose estrogen in menopause, their bone mineral density goes down. And that's why we see disproportionate amounts of osteopenia and osteoporosis in postmenopausal women. But as I've come to learn in the last year, that process actually begins and experiences the greatest decline perimenopausally. And if we wait until a woman is in menopause to begin treating her, we actually miss out on the greatest opportunity to prevent BMD, bone mass density decline. And that, women who are still 5 to 7 years away from menopause will actually benefit from low levels of hormones, typically starting with progesterone even before estrogen, and managing that. So honestly, like it's one of these topics that is it's a shame, right? For all the reasons I've discussed previously, the misrepresentation of the Women's Health Initiative, the inability of people who were so firmly on one side of a belief system to simply acknowledge they made mistakes, and the fear mongering that it has produced in women to this day is it's very frustrating. I'll give you another example. I mean, it's very much in vogue now for women to be offered estrogen blocking drugs without any history of breast cancer, but if they are deemed quote unquote high risk. I find this practice to be very odd, especially given that such therapies have never been demonstrated to extend lifespan by a day. And yet they come with a lot of nasty side effects, which again, I think speaks to the problem of ignoring health span completely and focusing only on lifespan. In this case, it's particularly egregious because there isn't even a lifespan benefit, and yet there's a clear health span cost. So estrogen fear mongering is just something that probably drives me more nuts than almost anything I see coming out of medicine 2.0 at the moment.